Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of One on One celebrating the great Fordham basketball teams of the 70s. We're now joined by Tom Sabella, who was actually on the call for the 1973 Fordham upset against Notre Dame, game winning shot hit by the Darrell Brown. And Tom, it is great for you to join us today here on WFUV Sports. Always wonderful to have an alumni back.
Thanks. Glad to help out.
So, first question, Tom, for you. That era of Fordham hoops in those early 70s, I know we talked so much about the 26-3 team. And then, of course, there were a couple of good teams after that. But that specific era was unlike anything ever that's happened at Rose Hill. What was it like to experience that firsthand?
Well, it was a lot of fun. I mean, Fordham was playing, Fordham, NYU, Manhattan were always second fiddle to St. John's. And when Digger came in and ignited the team and the fans, it was very, very different. And the campus was excited. The fans were excited. And after 26-3, we had hopes of always being on that level of St. John's. But we hung on for a couple of years after that, 3, 4 years. But after that, it didn't stay.
Tom, you think back, to the Rose Hill Gymnasium and, how historic that gym is. And, you look at the team now, it's, kind of getting the fans back. It's starting to fill up again. Just what was the gym like back when you were calling those games? And, how do you think it compares to now?
The gym at the time, it had better crowds. I've seen it got a paint job since I was there, which is hopeful. And the pigeons are gone. But when people came, we played 70 every year at Madison Square Garden. So the biggest games were there with St. John's and Notre Dame and Marquette and a few others. In Maryland, we were scheduled at the time. And but when we got a home game, the fans came out and had a great time. And they never sold it out on a regular basis. It was, you get 2,700, but it was always loud, and you always knew it was a Fordham home game.
So, Tom, the first college game to sell out at Madison Square Garden was actually Fordham versus Notre Dame in 1971, and the Rams won that game.
Yes.
If you could ever imagine a little Fordham University selling out the world's most famous arena, looking back on it over 50-something years later, can you still fathom the fact that that even happened?
Well, you had great fans in New York. They loved basketball. And I'm pretty sure that was a doubleheader night. And they used to have doubleheaders on Thursday in the Garden, about that Garden and the previous one too. But it was just exciting. The fans wanted to be a part of it, and they bought tickets. And you're going to talk to Malcolm Moran later, who said he couldn't get in. I mean, I was a sophomore. I didn't even try to get in. But it's to where basketball is in New York now. I mean, St. John's doesn't even play in the Garden much anymore, except for 2 or 3 games. So I don't know why basketball has dropped off. Maybe because they're always looking for winners in New York, but I don't know.
You look at that specific game, the Fordham Notre Dame game from 1973. Digger Phelps, he's on the other sidelines for that game. Just what was that like, him returning to the Rose Hill gym? And do you think that added any fuel to the fire for Fordham?
Oh, yes, it did. I mean, they were angry that he left, because he was the great hope that Fordham basketball would always be at 26-3 or nearby. And then when he left, he took his 2 top recruits with him. And, Hal Whistle was a very nice man, and a good coach, but he won a national title later with Florida Southern, but he didn't have the charisma of Phelps. Phelps had this personality that was just, drew people to him and drew players to him. And, and the previous year we went out to Notre Dame and beat them pretty good there, because he was in a rebuilding state. And in New York, when he came into the Garden for that first game back, the fans they were ready for him, ready with the booze and the banners and everything else. They were, they wanted to welcome him home, and as only New York fans can.
Tom, do you remember those 2 recruits that Digger took with him to South Bend?
One was Peter Crotty, and I don't remember the other kid's name. Might have been Novak, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And I got in trouble for Peter Crotty because during the game I lost my voice. The only time in my entire life I lost my voice in the second half, and I was like over exaggerating the pronunciations. And the next day I got asked why I was saying Peter Crotty with such disdain, and I said, well, it wasn't my fault. That was just my voice and falling apart.
So, you look at those, Fordham teams, obviously Ken Charles was kind of the overlap from that 1970-71 team, but also, Charlie Yelverton, he's going to get his number retired. Do you have any memories of him as a player? I know you weren't maybe on those calls, but just being a student at the university.
Charlie was a very clutch player. He always hit the shot when you needed, played good defense. He was fast. He wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but he was the leader of that team. And Kenny was a sophomore, and I had watched Kenny play basketball from the time he was a freshman in high school, because he went to Brooklyn Prep in Brooklyn and I went to Nazareth, and we were both the same age. And I watched him, all the way up to when he played with the Buffalo Braves in the NBA, and he was a clutch shooter. But with him and Charlie, they were a deadly combination. And Kenny most of that year came off the bench as the sixth man, but Charlie was an excellent player, and definitely deserves to have his number retired.
So, Tom, a little bit of a organizational question for you. If you were to go through and name the 5 greatest Fordham men's basketball players throughout our history,
okay,
who would they be and why?
Well, you got to go with Ed Conlon, because he was the leading scorer. And I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not too familiar who's played in the last few years, because I haven't followed it. But for my era and before, it was Ed Conlon and Frank McLaughlin and Charlie and Kenny and Darrell Brown. But I like I said, that's not being fair to the guys that have played recently, because I haven't seen them play.
Oh, that's fair. I mean, we understand that, but we always love the history and the trip down memory lane. So I do respect the list. And one more from me. If you look back on that season and then what sort of preceded it after, ranking the greatest New York college basketball seasons of all time, where does the Fordham one fit? Because I know everyone's going to point to St. John's, and then PJ Carlissimo goes to the Final Four with the Pirates. And there's a lot of teams you can throw in there, but where are you going to put the Fordham one?
You got to put it in top 5. I mean, you had the City College team that won the NCAA and the NIT in the same year. So nobody's ever else done that. Not Kentucky, not UCLA, not anybody. But so they have to be there. And the St. John's teams of Carnesecca, and this 26-3 team, and then PJ's team in Seton Hall. That's your top 4 as far as I'm concerned.
Tom, it's really interesting hearing about the basketball side of things from when you were calling the games. But, we're broadcasters ourselves. We're calling the Fordham team now. What was it like being on air, calling those games? And do you have any memories of calling broadcasters that maybe stand out from the rest?
Well, I don't understand being calling broadcaster. I mean, just calling a game?
Yeah.
No, none of them stood out. It was just exciting. I mean, especially you did the games from Rose Hill, which we used to do them from that upper level, which I found was a great vantage point to do a game. And that was exciting the first time I did that. But going into the Garden, that was, and that was a tremendous experience. But the place filled, and the music and the players and the great teams that we played against in there. And we played a couple of road trips. South Carolina had a wonderful arena. It was a most up-to-date arena. And then we played in LA and in Stanford. That was exciting, very exciting to for a kid from Brooklyn to call a game in New York radio. It was great.
Well, Tom Sabella, homegrown talent from Brooklyn, New York, Fordham University, always runs strong through his blood. Tom, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Well, glad to help out anytime, guys. Thank you and good luck.
We'll be right back here on One on One. Welcome back, everyone, to One on One, our special edition celebrating the legacy of the 1971 Fordham men's basketball team, now joined by Bob Heck, who was also a student at Rose Hill at the time when the team was on campus, witnessed them firsthand, also was on the call for the 1973 upset against Notre Dame with the game-winning shot hit by the Darrell Brown. And Bob, great as always for you to join us here on WFUV Sports. Welcome back.
That's right. It's great to be back. And don't forget to support WFUV.
There we go. We love the enthusiasm. It's a great day to be a Ram. Now, Bob, first question, that 1971 team, I know we talk a lot about, especially in college sports, culture is just such a big component of having a successful program, a team, a school. The culture around the school during that time, I don't even know how I can begin to imagine it, because it just feels so surreal and something that was pulled out of a fairy tale. Did you get any sort of feelings like that when you were on campus, especially when they started winning those first few games?
Well, think of it this way. May of 1970, Kent State occurs. I start Fordham that fall. So the political atmosphere in America is very charged. We get to Fordham. I started FUV. I literally walk in. I said, I've got good communication skills. What can I do? You're a reporter. And the first thing I had to cover was the takeover of the administration building by the Students for a Democratic Society. So I had to go in there with a microphone, interview the people, interview the president of the university, got the job done. I realized you just got to keep asking questions. And that was a great start to my career because it was always live. It was news and sports. So I guess I was made for that sort of thing. But it was an incredible time to be at Fordham because there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of demonstrations. And the basketball team, when it took off in early 71, when you realized they were that good, it really united the campus. And it was a great thing that happened during a difficult time.
Bob, looking at that 1971 team and all that they were able to accomplish, what stands out to you the most as you look back on the group? And for you, what was the most special about that team and allowed them to go on that run to the Sweet 16?
Well, the coach, Digger Phelps, who was a media magnet and was very personable. You know how he got his nickname Digger, right? He dug graves up in Westchester County.
He was the Undertaker's son, right?
Right. So, he had that great story. He was very personable. He was always on the local news, 2, 4, and 7, promoting Fordham. And then, of course, we started winning. And then it was like, oh, my God, we're going to go to the NCAAs. And when we won the first round, I believe we beat Furman from South Carolina. And then we played Villanova in the round of 16. And, of course, we lost to a tremendous Villanova team that eventually would win the national championship and then have it taken from them because Howard Porter, their star, had signed a pro contract with the ABA. And if you look it up, the Villanova national championship of 71 is vacated because of his unfortunate signing. Today, he would just be another athlete signing an endorsement deal.
So, Bob, I know the changing landscape between NIL now versus what NIL may have been back then. Obviously, it wasn't legal in any sort of the sense, but now all the athletes are getting paid. If we were to take that Fordham team and put them in the modern era of college basketball, how much publicity do you think they would get in today's market versus what they were getting back then? And back then, they were already getting quite a bit of attention.
Well, Charlie Yelverton was a true star. I mean, he was a great ball player, very popular. Darrell Brown was an up-and-coming kid who, of course, will sink the great shot against Notre Dame at the Holiday Festival. But you also had Kenny Charles, Frank Hayward. You had a bunch of – it was a nice team of role players. And back when Phelps, when Digger coached, he mixed and matched beautifully. So they were a very they were an easy team to root for because they had a lot of underdogs who played, various roles that all meshed.
Bob, I want to talk about that 1973 upset against Notre Dame, obviously at Madison Square Garden, 10,000 fans. Just take me through what that experience was like for you calling that, what the environment was like being there for that upset.
Well, we were nervous because it was a big game. And, the first thing you check on is, does the line work? So when we got up to the broadcast booth, the engineer immediately, checked the line. Are we good? Check back with FUV. Everything's good. So we knew we had the line. So, okay, now we actually have to do the job. So I just remember probably over researching every possible statistic I could so that, when I came up with a color commentary moment, I actually sounded like I knew what I was talking about. So, yeah, there was a lot of pressure, actually. I remember that because it was the biggest game since the NCAAs. And, of course, everybody wanted Fordham to win.
So playing against Notre Dame in 1971, they had a great player, Austin Carr, who averaged obscene numbers in points. I think he averaged 30 points per game one year. And Fordham took them down at a sold-out Madison Square Garden, which was the first college game to be sold out at the Mecca at the time. 19,500 fans cheering for the Rams, Bob. Again, 50 years later, you look at it now with the St. John's or Seton Hall like that, and Fordham was the first team to do that. Did you ever see that coming really once they kicked it into a higher gear, or were you sort of like, yeah, you know what, they'll be pretty good, but we don't know if they're going to go any further than that?
Well, I came from a pretty well-run high school athletic program at Holy Cross. So I was used to big time sports. Holy Cross had won a couple of Catholic championships in baseball, beating teams like, a lot of the great teams, including Fordham Prep. But Fordham, it happened so fast. And then everybody was like, well, yeah, I think we were like 10-1, something like that. And it was like, this is real. And of course, the staff, I mean, Malcolm, Tom Sabella, Lenny Klatt, all the guys that worked, we all worked as the team like you guys do now. We just wanted to make sure we did our best job, because it was like, this has fallen in our lap. We have a nationally ranked team. So, it made us better broadcasters at a very young age, put it that way.
One of the players that overlapped between the 71 Fordham Rams and the 72, 73 Fordham Rams is Ken Charles. You mentioned him. The leading scorer of that 73 team, and obviously a huge part of the 70-71 team as well. How impressive was he to watch firsthand?
Total, absolutely great. He was like a Steph Curry. He was a killer. He was an absolute killer. You wanted him to have the ball with 9 seconds to go before the end of the first half, where you needed a tie game. And of course, there were no 3-point shots then. So, Kenny was great. They had a great inside game too. Darryl Brown was a great rebounder. So, it's funny. I keep thinking of the teams very similarly, even though they had two different coaches and they spanned, two different squads. But there was a consistent level of hustle and team play that was featured by both coaches.
Bob, if you were to rank the 5 greatest Fordham players in the history of the program, who would they be and why?
Well, I got to go with the guys I remember while I was in school. I graduated in 74. So, of course, you have Kenny Charles, you have Darryl Brown. I even wrote it down here. Charlie Yelverton, those 3. I remember PJ Carlissimo, not as a great player. He was a super sub and a great guy. And he was in a tough situation because his father was the athletic director. But PJ was a real student of the game. And we were not surprised when he became successful at Seton Hall. Frankie McLaughlin, who eventually, I think, became the athletic director.
Yeah,
and
he
was
did.
A terrific man, is a terrific man. So those would be the names that, quickly come to mind for me. The one thing I can share with you, because I may be the only one who witnessed it and was sober enough to remember it, was after the game. There's a bar on 33rd Street next to the Garden. It was a kind of a hole-in-the-wall bar. You'd go in and get, pitchers of beer. Well, the entire Fordham crowd that could get in got in. There had to be 200 to 300 people. It was going nuts. Hal Whistle walks in with a couple of the guys from the team. The bar goes crazy. He's like, Caesar arriving in Rome. And the bartender says, "Hey, coach, we've got to put your tie up behind the bar in our place of honor." So Whistle's like, "Sure." And he's starting to take his tie off. He says, "We don't need you to do that, coach." The bartender comes over, cuts his tie with a scissor, takes a thumbtack and posts it up behind the bar. And he said, "Hey, coach, you're now in our Hall of Fame." Crowd went crazy, stayed there probably to 2, 3 in the morning. And it was like a night that you didn't want to end because it was just insane. It was like winning the NCAAs.
Bob, that's awesome. And brings up for me a lot of personal kind of parallels to the Fordham team this year. And there's been parallels between, teams over the years for the Rams and what Fordham has been doing this season, and a couple of big wins for Fordham, especially a one over St. Louis at the Rose Hill Gym. I'm just curious, if you've been following Fordham this season, what have they been able to do to kind of revive the program, and what have you seen from them, kind of watching from afar?
Well, again, I mean, the coach is doing it. Who's the coach? His name, I can't think of.
His name is Keith Ergo.
He's doing a hell of a job. And the team is playing again. You know, they're playing what I would call traditional basketball, where you got to keep the ball moving. I know you have to take 3-point shots. I understand the modern game, but this Fordham team seems to move the ball well. The Fordham team of my era 50 years ago really moved the ball and were quick. And quickness, you know, goes a long way. That PJ Carlissimo team that went to the Final Four, 20 plus years ago, they were another fast team. So you don't always have to have Shaquille O'Neal's. You need a lot of quick, fast, good players.
Bob Heck, we appreciate the time as always. Once a Ram, always a Ram.
You
Class
got
of
it.
1974, former WFUV sports alum, proud WFUV sports alum. Bob, thank you so much.
Thank you, and go Rams.
There we go. It's a great day to be a Ram. We'll be right back here on One on One.